our presentation on the China study, we had the obesity chapter. In the China study, it introduces the idea of a low-fat, whole-food, plant-based diet. This theory is introduced as a long-term intervention to minimize the risk of chronic diseases, including obesity.
And the first article, it was the low BMI and non-meat eaters. They used a food frequency questionnaire that consists of 28 foods, and it determined macronutrient consumption differences between non-vegetarians and vegetarians in the United Kingdom. The results were lower BMI for non-meat eaters, and the correlation was paired with lower intake of animal fat, decreased intake of alcohol in men, and increased intake of dietary fiber in vegetarians. The food frequency questionnaire had strong information, but not enough to be validated. The second article was mortality in vegetarians and non-vegetarians. It was a meta-analysis study. It combined 5 studies that provided estimates for associations between vegetarians and the risk of disease from specific causes. Data for over 76,000 men and women were available. It's concluded that vegetarians had a 24% lower mortality rate for heart disease compared to non-vegetarians. There was no association of a vegetarian diet with other major causes of death, and this does not support the thesis from the China study.
In another article is toward improved management and NIDDM, which is non-insulin dependent diabetes. This was a randomized controlled study, and the subjects were recruited through newspaper advertisements. Some of the requirements: they must be older than 25, be of Hawaiian descent, and suffer from NIDDM. Overall, they found 11 subjects to be part of the study. For the experimental group, they had to follow a low-fat vegan diet for 12 weeks, and the control group had to follow a restricted diet, and the meals were prepared for them. After 12 weeks, the experimental group lost 16 pounds, while the control group lost 8 pounds. Some of the problems and why it shouldn't have been used in the study was it was too small of a sample size to generalize to the population. The exclusions were not mentioned by Campbell. He didn't say that they only had diabetes mellitus. He made it like it could have been for any population. And the control diet was not representative of a normal diet, and the journal was not from a reliable source.
The next study was on the effects of high energy and low energy dense diets. The study was a randomized clinical trial consisting of 20 obese and non-obese subjects. Participants either received option of a low energy dense meal or a high energy dense meal in hopes to prove that low energy dense meal would prolong eating time and induce satiety. The low energy dense meals consisted of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and low fat. And the high energy dense meals were larger fat content and simple sugars. They did prove their hypothesis that subjects consuming adequate amount of low energy dense foods consumed on average half the calories of high energy dense foods. And the obese and non-obese people responded similarly, so this could be used as an intervention for obesity. There were several limitations in this study, one being the small sample size and the other being the short term of the study. It's possible that over a long period of time, the energy consumption of the low energy dense foods could increase, and because of this information was most likely not a good source for the China study.
The next article was on energy balance, and it was data from rural China. The study was a comprehensive study of human diet, lifestyle, disease, and mortality. The subjects were 65 countries from rural China, and it correlated with energy balance. People in rural China had a high energy intake with a lower body mass. This could have come from increased physical activity. And the results of the study showed that diets are not as constant or consistent as seen in China. The American diets aren't as constant or consistent as the ones seen in China. Further research should be done to show whole food, plant-based diets should be used as an intervention instead as a lifestyle. And then the next article was an article about dietary protein used on lab rats. The study was a clinical trial. The subjects were 344 lab rats. They used representative sampling, and the type of protein they used on the rats was casein or cow's milk. And one group of the rats was fed 5% casein while the others were fed 20%. And the group that was fed 5% exercised twice as much. They also had lower cancer rates and a significantly lower blood cholesterol. And even though they consumed slightly more calories, they burned it off through thermogenesis as body heat. The article did agree with the China study in that the rats that consumed a lower calorie diet were more active. The article also showed a direct correspondence of calorie intake and exercise. However, the China study failed to mention that the 5% casein diet rats the ones that didn't consume enough protein experienced harmful side effects such as lesions. Also, this article was an abstract that was published in 1988. So, since it was an abstract, the publication can't be verified, so we can't assume that it's credible.
Our conclusion of this China study is that they sought to prove that the use of a whole food, plant-based diet could serve as an intervention for obesity. The Campbells were selective with information that they chose. This is due to their bias as the authors. And although some of the proof presented was reliable, there was not enough correlation to prove that the intervention of a vegetarian diet is the solution of